Hello and welcome to another episode of Cascading Mountain Weather. It's Thursday, May 22nd, and we're looking at the forecast this weekend for Memorial Day weekend, which is a long weekend for a lot of people. So to start out, we're gonna kind of review what has happened this spring. It's been overall, this year has been quite dry in most parts of Washington. We've seen anywhere from 50 to 90% of normal precipitation. However, if you look at more late February until now, it's a lot closer to normal across a lot of states. So that shows how January was just exceptionally dry. And because we get a large amount of our precipitation in January here, the fact that we had a dry January makes it really hard to recover from. Temperatures have been quite normal across the region. We've seen some warmer, some cooler periods, but overall, both through the entire year and in the last month, it's been relatively normal. So the last week has been after kind of a pretty dry April, I would say, and dry beginning of May. We had a quite wet week for mid-May last week. Sections of the mountains received over 5 inches of rain, and even in the lowlands, most areas got around an inch. And above 5 to 6,000 feet, a lot of that precipitation fell as snow. So we don't know for certain how much fresh snow is out there, but looking at the this model forecast in the North Cascades, areas of 2 feet of snow in the Baker area, and some reports from earlier this week do say there's, in the ballpark of 2 feet of fresh snow. However, in other areas, definitely less. And as you get to the Eastern Cascades, there's probably just a few inches. If you're looking at going to Rainier, also, Rainier, probably you could expect a foot or so snow. The upper elevations, granted, it might be blown around by the wind and stuff, but we were in a pretty long corn cycle, and now definitely things are going to be a little more variable. You might find some old POW, you might find some Makey snow, you might find some good corn again. So just keep in mind that, stability and snow conditions are going to be a bit more variable this weekend than they have been through much of this spring, which has been quite productive for harvesting corn. So this graphic shows snow depth. You can see basically all the valleys are melted out, the passes are melted out, and it's really terrain above, I'd say, 4,000 feet on the west side and above 5 or 6,000 feet on the east side. Our snow water equivalent is, generally below average. It's better in the Southern Cascades, worse in the North Cascades, but percentages are definitely, a little bit suspect as a measurement at this point in the season because many lower elevation snowtail sites are completely melted out. So while they'll be at 0%. So the percentage is not necessarily the most helpful thing to look at. I think what's more helpful to look at is like how many weeks are we melting ahead of normal schedule. So this is Stevens Pass, and it's just about to melt out the snowtail site there, May 22nd. And you can see normally it melts out around June 6th, so about 2.5 weeks later. So, we're 2.5 weeks early on the melt out for Stevens Pass. Comparing it to previous years, 24, 23, actually quite similar. So you'll probably see a similar snowpack depth to what you saw around this time last year. Here's Hart's Pass. So it's actually kind of flattened out a little bit with the cooler, wetter weather, and is not so far behind schedule now. Here's Easy Pass in the North Cascades, and it actually bumped up, adding about 2.5 inches of snow water equivalent over the last week. And now it's, not that far behind normal. So you can see with the higher elevations and the recent snow, those areas are closer to normal than the lower elevations, which have already melted out.
So now that we've been talking a lot about kind of what we might see out on the trails up in the mountains, let's kind of go into our weekend forecast. So this is looking at 3 hour precipitation as we go through the weekend. So this is Thursday night into Friday, and you can see that there's not too much going around. As we get later in Friday, it does look like there's a chance that maybe a little bit of showers might pop up, maybe slightly convective showers overnight Friday, but not much is going to happen. It should be a pretty nice day over much of the area. And then as we go into Saturday, we see that it basically stays completely dry. It's when we get late into Sunday that things get a little bit more interesting. And Sunday evening into Sunday night, we might see the chance of some convective activity, some thunderstorms building, especially on the east side, but these might also be over the Cascades. So don't pay too much attention to exactly where these are. It just means that there is a chance of this happening Sunday night into Monday morning. And then what we can see is there is actually a system that's going to kind of push onshore early into mid Monday that's going to bring maybe some showers, especially at kind of the lower elevations on the west side. The east side should stay mostly dry, but as we get into kind of Monday evening, these should fade. And all those days are going to be pretty nice. I want to just highlight that was the European model we were just looking at. This is looking at the American model for a similar time frame, and this is 2 a.m. Monday, and you can see that it actually has slightly stronger storms maybe moving through on Monday morning. Once again, I don't think that these are going to be particularly significant. They might produce like a little bit of lightning, some rain at times, like this is predicting maybe upwards of a tenth of an inch, maybe up to a quarter of an inch. So it's something to be aware of on Monday, like Monday morning, Sunday night. But I don't think it doesn't look like it's going to be a significant thunderstorm outbreak by any means. We can also look at the lightning flash density. This is going back to the European model. And as we go later into the day on Sunday, you can see that there's a much better chance of thunderstorms down near in kind of the Oregon Cascades, especially central Oregon. And then these drift up slightly with a couple of spots arriving kind of towards the eastern Cascades, the eastern slopes. And this, once again, could be over the Cascades as well, but probably not really making its way into Western Washington, and especially not really over into the Olympics. And then those fade out as we get later in Monday. So this is 10 a.m. Monday. You'll see that they have mostly disappeared. If we look at cloud cover, I'm just going to highlight this is all the different layers of cloud. So we have low cloud cover right here in the upper left-hand corner down to there's high right here, and this is kind of total. And as we go through the day Friday, you can see that there's kind of a number of like clouds drifting through. Generally, high clouds are going to dominate Friday and Saturday. So you can see that we also have some high clouds through much of Saturday, but there's clearing at times. And then as we get into the end of day Sunday. So this is about 4 p.m. on Sunday. This is when we might be seeing some of those thunderstorms pick up. And then you can also see this line of clouds coming in from the coast that is this high clouds that is that kind of weak system that's going to push in. And as we get later into Sunday night into Monday morning, so this is 10 a.m. Monday, you can see that our high clouds have basically gone, but now we have a lot more low clouds, especially on the west side, so that our total clouds are the combination of our high and low clouds. But this is when you might be seeing more mist or light rain on the west side on that Monday morning to Monday afternoon time frame. But you should see decent amount of sun as well. If we look at temperatures, we can see that this is kind of the forecast high using the New Balance model, which is kind of a combination of a bunch of different models. This is for Friday. So 60s. And then as we get into Saturday, we'll see 70s in the lowlands, maybe 50s to 60s in the mountains. So it's going to be pretty warm on Saturday. Sunday is the warmest day, especially east of the Cascades. We might see some 70s in the lower valleys as well, like the river valleys, and up in the mountains, once again, kind of that 50s to 60s. And then we see that our high temperatures on Monday are significantly cooler, partially as a result of that slightly more onshore push and extra cloud cover, a little bit more precipitation. If we look at low temperatures, which are important for knowing kind of how the snow might behave, this is Thursday night into Friday. You can see plenty of temperatures near freezing. The same thing happens Friday night into Saturday, where we'll mostly have a pretty good overnight refreeze, especially at elevations. Once we get into Sunday, so Saturday night into Sunday, your chances of a refreeze are still decently good because it should be relatively clear overnight. But there might be less of a refreeze, and then especially by Monday when there's both cloud cover and temperatures kind of in the 30s to mid 30s to low 40s, you might be not having that good of a refreeze. And one final thing I wanted to point out were the wind speed. So this is the 700 millibar wind speed. So you'd only be really interacting with this if you were going towards summits in like the high northern Cascades or on the volcanoes. And we can see that as we go through Friday, so this is Friday at 4 p.m. and into Saturday, it's pretty quiet. So it shouldn't really be that windy on Saturday. Sunday, the winds start to pick up. This is about 30 knots. So roughly 35 miles per hour, and it continues to pick up as we go into Sunday and into kind of Monday as well before it starts to fade. So just be aware of that. You might be dealing with some gusty, slightly gusty winds, maybe 20, 30, maybe even up to 40 miles an hour in those uppermost elevations. Just wanted to highlight the National Weather Service point forecast for Paradise, noting that looks like Friday and Saturday and Sunday kind of warming up into Saturday and Sunday with highs in the 50s to 60s. This is for about 5,000 feet, so right at that Paradise level. And then we see that cool down for the actual Memorial Day with a chance of showers. But you'll notice that it also says like partly sunny. So you will have a good chance of seeing the sun even if you go out on Monday. And then also wanted to highlight our long term going forward. Our snow is melting, as Kyle mentioned, pretty quickly. It's been paused a little bit, but it looks like we are going to go into a warmer than normal period of time for the next 1 to 2 weeks. So that will continue to accelerate the melting as we go forward. And it looks like it should be warmer than normal and probably maybe a little bit drier than normal.
Well, thank you to everyone for listening. Hope you guys have a